So we have 5 board members in attendance. Director Carey will be joining us at some point in time. He's just running a little late. And Director Jurgensen is out of town and is excused. Please join me as we observe a moment of silence. Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. Director Nelson, can you please make the motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
I move that the Board of Education adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Director Benkes?
Aye.
Director Hafley?
Aye.
Director Malpaka?
Aye.
Director Nelson?
Aye.
Director Ott?
Aye.
The ayes have it. That agenda has been adopted. Executive session. We have executive session for roughly 90 minutes today. Director Benkes, can you please make the motion to move to executive session?
I move that the Board of Education convenes into executive session to discuss legal advice per CRS 24-6-402, Section 4, Part B, particular matter, February 14th, 2025, Office for Civil Rights, dear colleague, letter regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, and recommendation for employee termination. Negotiations per CRS 24-6-402, Section 4, Part E, particular matter, workers' compensation claim and employee compensation. Personnel per CRS 24-6-402, Section 4, Part F, particular matter, superintendent contract renewal and workers' compensation claim. Documents that may not be disclosed under the Colorado Open Records Act per CRS 24-6-402, Part 4, Section G, particular matter, workman's compensation claim.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you for reading that motion, Director Benkes. That was a long one. Roll call, please.
Director Benkes?
Aye.
Director Hafley?
Aye.
Director Malpaka?
Aye.
Director Nelson?
Aye.
Director Ott?
Aye.
The ayes have it. We will enter into executive session now and rejoin up here at the board dais at approximately 5:30 p.m.
Okie dokie.
Okay, here's your magic number, okay?
It is just you.
Yeah.
Whether it's valid or not, it's like, okay, we gotta give a little bit type thing, I'm guessing, okay, let's give you, here's. ATV going being crazy.
Right.
Right, I don't know if you.
They were
wanted to make sure.
You meet so many people.
In my mind, I thought, but thank you for telling me.
Oh,
I think
Yeah,
it's.
I don't always
It's hard to
remember.
remember everybody's name.
that freak accident.
Well, you know, you're tractor, you're not in an enclosed space, you don't know anything. So I think it's just any sort of, I mean, they probably don't want you driving either, but they know that you have to drive.
I think the airbag probably will drop.
Maybe in the middle of the week. You're gonna leave my nose, I mean, I've had an accident before and.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
And I occasionally drive up and do some advanced chemistry at the bank.
Yeah, I've got a friend at church.
It's prescribed. Is it not
And he's
prescribed?
been there
You can get a package.
25 years or something. And I'm just fascinated by the generational,
See if I can find
you know, changes you see as you teach.
Yeah.
You've probably seen that too.
Just a little. This is my 6th year there.
Yeah.
So last year, my very first crop of students commissioned as officers. But that was only last year. So
Oxford.
or commissioned as officers,
Oh, officer. Okay.
right? Because at the end of their time,
That's right, they're second
commissioned
lieutenants.
as second lieutenants. That's
Yeah. So, anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, let's,
Go ahead.
but we don't have Superintendent Goff as well.
You weren't downstairs?
Oh, I got it.
golf to do that.
Just after 4.
Then you. Golf to do that.
Oh, that's right. Can you check on Superintendent Goff downstairs?
Remind him he has a meeting.
I can go.
Where's security?
Yeah, but
We're happy to have. Yeah, you've lost your voice, that's fair.
So you're not gonna say that tonight?
I'll just join you.
Okay, let's get started. So we are reconvening in public session at 5:45 p.m. Earlier this afternoon, the board adopted the agenda as presented. We have returned from executive session and there is no need to modify the agenda. Pledge of Allegiance, we have Mr. Tom Hess from Palmer and also Rebecca Kenderdine, both of us leading us together in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Gall, you have a Jenkins Middle School update.
Yes, to the board and the community, before we transition into the work session, sometimes things are easier to talk about from the dais. Brief update with some significant dates for our community to pay attention to. All these slides will be uploaded and communicated. We'll get a letter out on Friday to all the associated families and potential families to continue our transparency and conversations. So who's going to remember to turn that on? So the main update, in keeping with, we shared to you all the second bullet on there on the intent of bringing partial occupancy back to Jenkins for August of 25. I think what we didn't share with folks is that if you bring a new sixth grader to Jenkins next year, they will then do sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade at Jenkins. We believe we are on the path to bringing the building back to totality and want to start that with incoming sixth graders next year. So if you are a family looking for a middle school, please consider the awesomeness of Jenkins Jaguar Nation. And if you are having to contemplate that you're not sure that we can be ready, by all means continue to get your choice permit into your other school or your other district. We will honor any incoming sixth grader to Jenkins up until the first couple of weeks of school. We're so excited to have you. Our 7th and 8th grade plans are still waiting final reports. We have a draft report due on Friday from our architectural and general contractor firm, and that final report will be available on March 28th. We will brief that internally on March 31st, and in keeping with that timeline, we will be conducting 2 more town halls the second week of April at Doherty High School for both incoming desirable Jenkins families and current families of Jenkins students who are dislocated at Russell and at Doherty. So those dates will come out. We just have to confirm with the current Doherty staff when they have performances in the auditorium already scheduled. But we look forward to seeing you the second week of April, hoping to have renderings and budget timelines and more complete answers on the current challenges in the 7th and 8th grade wing. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, thank you for the thank you for the update. Board questions? I don't see anything, Superintendent Gall, but thank you for keeping the community updated. So we look forward to the report. Probably at the April 2nd board meeting, the board will receive the next report with that final draft from our architect and construction team. But it's good news that 6th grade is going to be at Jenkins for the start of next school year. That's the plan at this time, possibly 7th grade as well, but that is going to be decided based on what we hear at the report, 7th and 8th grade. Thank you. With that, if there is nothing else to discuss at the time, seeing no further business, if there are no objections, this meeting will adjourn at 5:49 p.m.
church starts. It's just so quiet.
I'm just waiting for Sandra to join.
She's gonna be so involved.
Well, let's get started and Sandra will join us. So the time is 5:54 p.m. and we are at the work session on March 19, 2025. In attendance are Director Art, Director Nelson, Director Hafley, Director Malpacum, Director Carey, and Director Backus. And Director Jurgensen is excused. We have Superintendent Gall and some of his team members, and we have some people in the audience as well. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. The first item on the agenda is a summary of the 4 listening sessions that the board had at each one of our high schools over the past month or so. And I want to thank the board members for participating in it. Each one of you, engaged with the community at one of the high schools and had an opportunity to listen to them. And some of you were there at all 4 of the meetings, so you were able to listen and get the feedback directly from the community members. And some of you attended 1 or 2 meetings, but in any case, all the feedback that the board received was captured by Chief Ottmer, and Chief Ottmer is going to provide a brief overview and a summary of what the main takeaways were from those listening sessions.
Thanks, Director Malpacum or President Malpacum. The front portion of this deck is just the exact slides that were used at all 4 of the board listening sessions, just going into what the agenda looked like and then context that was shared at each meeting. So the board talked about their investments up front, talked about pieces within the employee handbook that they made assurances to staff about, and then had specific tasks from previous work sessions that they gave the EEG, the Employee Engagement Group, in order to work on the employee handbook. So all of these were shared at each of the community engagement sessions. And then at the back half of this deck is the data aggregated from all 4 meetings. So one of the interactive poll questions that was asked is select a role that you're representing and attending the session today. All of the 4 sessions were then put into one graph to be able to see who participated in the listening sessions from a role. Then how frequently do you watch Board of Education meetings or work sessions? Again, there will be some explainers down at the bottom of the data. The in size does change throughout. That's because we were using interactive technology, and so sometimes if an audience who is a participant in the audience didn't put in their answer, you might see the in size change. So I did capture that down at the bottom of the slides, whether it's 53 or 50, just depended on whether they answered the question that was in front of them. This question, the EEG, the Employee Engagement Group, did use when we were talking about the employee handbook. One of the tasks that the board gave us was to discuss and develop a process for how frequently we would update that document. This was data that was also gathered, obviously, at the listening session to that end when we asked the people in the audience there. Some of the ways that you've interacted with the Board of Education. Here, participants could select multiple answers, and so you see the ways that people are engaging with the board. This one was more of a qualitative measure. What are the most pressing issues facing students in D11? And so all of the responses were taken and then captured in the following themes that you see. The bullets in this slide are direct quotes from the meeting, leading to show the examples that led up to the thematic pieces that were captured. And then this one was a Wordle that was created based on the initiatives in D11. Obviously, the larger the word is, the more responses, the greater frequency that occurred with. So D11 Promise came up out of the sessions often, the study abroad, the apprenticeship, the peak experiences, unified programming.
Experience is spelled wrong
Oh, thank you.
consistently then, if it's that big.
There you go.
That's a tricky word.
There you go.
Okay, thank you for
Yeah.
putting that together and summarizing it. this was an opportunity to engage with the community, get feedback. And I know sometimes when we have these town hall meetings, it can be productive conversation. The hope was that we can have productive conversations so that we can use the information that we gathered to then apply it as we look at the employee engagement handbook or any future action the board may get. But sometimes the conversation was also confrontational or but I appreciate each one of the board members willing to listen to what the community brought back as feedback, whether it was positive feedback or concerns that they expressed. Any major takeaways or board discussions on what you saw here? Go ahead.
I guess I'd just say briefly, I would thank the rest of the board for being willing to try something new. I thought this was an improvement over the town hall that we did the previous year. I think, right, that when engaging with the community, there's always kind of a trade-off between sitting there and listening versus kind of a two-way conversation. I liked this management of the trade-off better than some other things that we've tried. I don't know that the format necessarily would need to stay exactly the same, but in general, I thought, like I said, this was an improvement. I'd be tentatively interested in doing this kind of thing more. Not every year, not every conversation will be as contentious as this spring. But in general, I thought this was an improvement over other things that we've done.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you. And for the community that showed up and participated in this, thank you for showing up and participating and providing your feedback and all the information that you provided us is being captured. And while we consider future decisions as a board, we will take into consideration the feedback that you provided in these listening sessions, and your voice certainly matters. Thank you. We are good with that. The next item on the agenda is going to be the employee engagement group. I also want to thank the staff before I move on. A lot of you were present in each one of those listening sessions and providing support to the board, including security that was present out there, so thank you. Moving on to the next item, the employee engagement group and the employee handbook update. I know that the employee engagement group has met 3 times so far, and you guys have provided minutes and update as to what you are doing, which is captured on the board website transparently for the public to see. The board tasked administration to bring a draft version of the employee handbook, and I want to make it clear to the community, this is just a draft preliminary version. This is probably going to go through several meetings and revisions and feedback from the board. Legal will get involved in it as well to take a look and make sure that everything is checking the boxes, necessary boxes that is required. With that, I'm going to, Superintendent Gaunt, do you need to set this up?
I think you set it up perfectly. I want to turn it over to the team and also thank them and for all the employees that have participated. I've had the good fortune of seeing them on the kickoff event and for at least one of the 2 other ones that were hosted. It is well attended. It is done with a lot of respect and a lot of collaboration and input. And so I know that can be difficult to do during change and transition. So hats off to both those that have facilitated and certainly to all those that have participated.
And I see one of the participants in that employee engagement group in our audience. Thank you. Oh, 2. Sorry. Anybody else that I'm missing that's part of the employee engagement
We're
group?
listening. Raise your hand.
Okay, thank you. 2 of them. Okay.
Okay, so the board had a work session where we got very clear tasks that the EEG needed to work on within the handbook. One of them, obviously, task 4, if I start from the bottom up, was to bring the complete draft, which is posted and we'll get into in a moment. But in between that, there were also 2 tasks on specific processes to include within the handbook, which are the communications and complaint procedure is how we kind of titled that in the working group. And then also the mechanism for handbook revision. And so before we go into the complete draft, we wanted to talk about the work that the committee had done on these 2 tasks. So the communication and complaints piece, when you go into the total handbook, at the top, in the middle kind of page 53, you'll see the complaint process, and then also it's within the communication section that you'll find more details about this piece. As the committee talked about developing a separate complaint procedure, we ended up looking at what was already written in the employee handbook and determining that that was enough, coupled with a tool that's coming that I'll have Ms. Harris speak to about the button called Speakfully that will also come to the piece when the board talked about this a little bit. You talked about having a button that would allow people to kind of be a whistleblower button, something like that. That's more a tool that Speakfully can kind of handle.
So Speakfully is a third-party platform that we currently utilize for our employee relations procedures. And so they actually come with another process that we have already purchased called Speakfully. So the kickoff for Speakfully will be done prior to July, so prior to the employee handbook being released. And it includes ways for people to either anonymously or put their name to any complaint that they wish to. And then it comes directly to Human Resources to further process and further investigate. And so it's actually a great tool to utilize and keeps employees really having a venue to report these concerns to, rather than reporting, say, for example, to Safe to Tell. We don't want employee concerns about other employees being reported in that venue. So this gives employees a very secure site to be able to report these situations to.
The conversations around the complaint process in the EEG were definitely that we would follow that. However, if your complaint is against your direct supervisor and you're not able to make any headway there, then it would go up the chain of command. So that was a lot of the conversation we had around the complaint procedure and process that's already in the employee handbook. That was the main question that arose during that time. Want me to keep going, or do we want to ask questions
Are there
at this
any
point about this
questions
one?
on this specifically? That's page 53 in the handbook. We can have a discussion after. Just go ahead and present all of it, and then we can have a discussion.
The next conversation we had was that task on revision. We had a lot of conversation on this across 2 separate meetings. At the first meeting, we started to have more convergence around why we might want to update more nimbly throughout the course of a year rather than just once annually. I'll have Dr. Comfort speak to that a little bit, and then we'll go into the procedure that we developed.
So there's a couple of reasons why we would need to adjust the employee handbook in the middle of the year. One, a law or policy change. We don't get to say, hey, we're waiting until next year, so we have to be able to adapt the handbook. The other thing is when there's something that we notice that needs to be improved. As I shared in our last conversation on this, we have that process now. And actually our employee group representation in the EEG were able to speak to that. Yes, when we find something that doesn't make sense, we surface it, we agree on it, we move forward. And so the EEG, I think, felt that, yes, in general, we want an annual process that we go through every spring where we make additions or adaptations as needed. But we also don't want to lose the flexibility about an improvement in the handbook. And so there would be kind of that process. That's then what we need to build out in more detail, which I think we'll speak to.
Right, so those 2 pieces we decided, the 3 steps that the EEG came to that we felt were important is to inform EEG of the date. There's a policy or a legal a statutory change. What's the date that we need to revise this by in order to be in compliance with whatever the new rule change is? Second, write the revision and make sure we notify staff and board. In both of the triggers of revision, you'll notice that was a lot of the conversation that the EEG had, was that they want to make sure staff know and are made aware of the change. We also talked about mechanisms to be able to do that when we make an update to the handbook. We could do that in a color-coded way so that it's very clear of what was changed throughout a year instead of just at that annual trigger. and then implement within the given timeline if it's a statutory requirement. The second one, the process right now that we have used kind of MOU on, or memorandums of understanding with different employee groups, this is where we would update that as needed when something is surfaced. We talked a lot about the way that would be surfaced. It could be surfaced by the board. The board gets a lot of feedback and input from employees in their inboxes. If they're getting a lot and they want the EEG to consider it, the board could bring that to the EEG and say, please have a conversation about this. Or it could work the other way, where an employee group, remember our employee groups will continue to meet with talent management. That's the TM up there. I apologize for not spelling that out. We'll continue to meet with talent management. Ms. Harris, are those monthly right now?
Every other week.
Okay, every other week. We're anticipating at minimum monthly moving forward. So in that group, when talent management meets, it's employee group specific. So there's a meeting with ESP, there's a meeting with teachers, and there's a meeting with Exec Pro. If an employee group were to say, we have this common issue that keeps recurring, they could surface it there, and then it would be brought to EEG. The third mechanism would be the EEG could surface it. Remember, the EEG is the meeting where we've got all employee groups around the table at once. It could be something that impacts all 3 employee groups, or it could be specific to a single employee group. Either of those ways, we could trigger, hey, we need to look at this and consider a revision. They learn of the need in a meeting. This was an important distinction. They wanted to make sure that the EEG hears about this in a meeting when we're all convening together versus getting an email about it. So that was a step in the process. Then we'd write the revision, notify staff of the revision, and then the board obviously has decision-making authority on whether the revision goes into the handbook or not. So the board would evaluate the change and then make the decision if that's going to be updated in the handbook.
Are we done?
Yeah, that's the done with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I know that the employee handbook was posted publicly and also for the board to review over the weekend. Again, this is just the first step in the process that the board is undertaking. It's a draft version, so I'll open it up for the board to provide feedback at this time as to what you heard from Chief Otmer on the tasks that were assigned and the feedback that they have provided, and also anything else. Let's confine ourselves with that tasks first, and then we can go to specifics in the employee handbook as well. Anything that stood out to you, Director Nelson?
I'm wrestling with that number 4 on this slide.
On this slide?
The BOE evaluates the change and makes the decision.
Okay.
Because I see this document as operations and we oversee policy. So I don't know that we should be the ones making the decision of whether it is to be changed or not. Like, I'm just wrestling with whether that's in our own lane.
Yeah, Director Nelson, thank you for the comment and the question. We had a similar discussion. That is how it is now. The board does have to agree to MOUs. So actually the board president signs those after he sends out notice to the board.
Because that would go into the contract automatically.
Even for our current handbooks, so even ESP or Exec Pro.
Okay.
And so I think the thought here is we want to make sure the board has a voice in any continued obligations. I think that was part of the thought of making sure the board had voice in MOUs, which is the handbook can result in a continued obligation. And so yes, content and contextualness, HR, talent management will manage, but we do want to make sure that ultimately that handbook is representing the board's wishes and expectations. And so we're based on the board's feedback, we are happy to make that. The decision is made by talent management because again, we will operationalize that, but we wanted to make sure that the board had decision making because of that obligation.
You good with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
think about that some.
Yeah, I just want to echo Director Nelson's point that stood out to me. One of the places where we ended the last time we talked about this is the whole handbook is an operational document. The whole handbook is kind of under ultimately the purview of the superintendent. It's not, we're kind of taking a bit of a more active role in paying attention in this time of transition. But I think the place we want to get to is the board is kind of staying at the 30,000 foot level of writing policy, setting goals, setting guardrails. I don't know that I want the board making the final call for kind of, you know, the operational in the weeds details of the handbook. To me, that feels like a superintendent decision. I don't actually know if you go to like surrounding districts, because again, every other surrounding districts in this county, the handbook is just what they use. Is it their boards making final say on handbook decisions? I don't think that it is.
I think when there's issues that have ongoing implications for the board, then that would trigger that at times. So if there's something that we would be obliged to over time because we make the change in the handbook that could relate to compensation, for example, if there's a stipend change, that does have a fiscal implication for the long term that would need board approval.
Yeah, as an example.
Stipend change feels different to me because it's, as you say, it's a fiscal concern.
And it's compensation,
And
we
that's-
have to approve all
Right,
compensation.
but if
That
you
would
wanna
naturally
change
come.
details on X, Y, and Z, like I don't feel like that's a board call.
So
I
for
guess I'm
That's
example,
part of what we're
wondering-
trying to get away
oh,
from.
go ahead.
I guess
Uh,
I'm wondering if it could be like a little bit more passive, like we're notified and then if we do have a concern or an issue, then it can be placed as an agenda item for us to discuss. But if we're like, okay, then it doesn't necessarily take an action for us to vote on the change, it being more of a if necessary or something. Maybe that's a middle ground.
So one thing that I can throw out there, and correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers out here, I think the teachers have 11 days of vacation time every year.
Yes.
So if that is going to be changed to say 9 or 13 on the other end, is that a board decision or is that an operational decision that rests on the superintendent? If we just increase it doesn't have a fiscal impact on there because it's just increasing the amount of vacation time.
I think it would
one
be-
way or the other.
Yeah, I apologize for interrupting,
Yeah.
President Malpack. I think it would be difficult for us to decide which decisions should be board decisions and not. I do appreciate Director Nelson's point of, is there notification? And then if the board wishes to bring that to conversation, then we absolutely can do that. We can just work under it's assumed it is approved until we're told otherwise. I think that would be good rather than, because some of these changes are multifaceted. And so there is a slight fiscal impact, but it's really about this, you know, it's not very cut and dry. And so I like your suggestion, and I think we're happy to bring that back to the EEG to say, talent management is kind of deciders, and then it goes up for notification to the board, and assuming no need for further conversation, then it is considered approved.
Well, and I would
Can I-
think
oh,
that
sorry,
the
Lauren.
relationship between, I would expect the relationship between the board and the superintendent would be that if he's wanting to make like a
Substantive.
yes, thank you, that change, like that conversation would be happening before he would just make that move, like to the point of vacation time. So, you know, it wouldn't be happening in a vacuum.
To be clear, that's a hypothetical, we're not.
Yeah,
that's
we're not
actually-
talking about doing
I'm
that.
not talking about, I'm just
Sure,
saying,
'cause
well, that's why I said both
That
ways,
is-
9 or
He said
13.
He said it, I didn't say it.
Sorry,
No, I
cut
just
you off.
wanted to have some clarity, who makes those decisions? Is it the board saying, so far, all those decisions have been made by the board? Whether it's an employee handbook or with the ESP and exec pros, or whether it's going to be the master agreement with the teachers. When we are talking about, okay, the employee handbook is an operational document, are we saying those type of decisions that don't have a fiscal impact are now going to be decided by the superintendent? And I know that, you know, generally speaking, we are in a environment where the board and the superintendent are collaboratively working together, but who knows what the future is? I can't predict 3 years from now.
I already told the
Listen
board
about
I intend to return for next year, so let's stop.
Well,
with
I'm
the
just talking
hypotheticals.
about your list. What happens in sometimes you read, I'm just talking about
Yeah, no, I
whatever it is, so we just need.
I think we should go back to the EEG and come back with a recommendation of where
Okay.
operations stop and policy starts. I
Okay.
think it's a good highlight from the board for the EEG to consider. And
Okay,
it might be a trip of something that impacts time, days or monies, or there might be some way to put it in there. But we don't certainly want to get into a place where when we change a colon to a semicolon, because or we misspelled experiences, that we have to have non-action and action to be able to get there.
Or phone number changes or position title changes, cause that's a lot in there and I think it needs to be, cause this is different than policy where we're trying to keep it so high level that you don't have titles necessarily spelled out, that if we change, it doesn't have to constantly need to be updated, but this document, I read that it's a living document, and so there can be those easy edits that don't need to come to the board.
And one thing I was remiss in mentioning is the EEG did kind of have similar conversation of, we don't know what we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So we need to get one of these triggered where like, hey, there might need to be a change as needed, and then walk through the process and figure out where was it bumpy, where was it smooth, and how might we revise the process given that, because we haven't experienced that yet. So I want to make sure I mention that as well.
Dr. Banks.
Well, and listening to this conversation about operations and the direction of the board, as I go through this, I found a couple of things, and I'm not sure that what was written and come to get. First of all, I want to thank the committee. I think this is the way to go about doing this, bringing the interested parties together, having robust conversation. We're on the right track. Getting to whether this is operations or policy, there's a couple of two things in here at least that I'm not sure reflects the board's direction. And so we go back to evaluates the change and makes a decision. I think, I don't know, because we haven't been there yet on the process of staying in our lane if all we're doing is being made aware of, as opposed to, does this fall in line with the direction of the board? And I have concerns about that. So it does, to me, it elevates to the policy level. While this may be regulation, does the regulation fall in line with the direction in which we, as the board, have said we want to go? And I think that conversation needs to have more than you're just gonna report out to us and they're just gonna report to us. I think when we have the responsibility to be critical readers of the document in front of us, then it should have more weight than just a piece of information that's coming to us.
So you want more decision?
I like the 4, yeah.
Okay, great. You had a second point as well?
No,
Okay,
when we get into this, we'll talk.
Okay, great, but you take it back to EEG, you heard the comments, maybe there is a line that we can talk about when it involves like what time, money, things of that nature, then it comes to the board for feedback and decision making, and if it is more purely operational, then that sticks to the superintendent. That right now is the direction. Director.
Just on 3 and 4, write the revision, I get that, notify staff of revision. So my question would be, is that all staff? Because you've just notified all staff of the revision, it sounds like it's approved. And then you're coming to the board to evaluate the change and make the decision. That's how it sounds like. So if we say no.
Possible revision, like maybe we need to add an additional word in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, yeah, and then obviously maybe there's 5 then, which is notify staff of the decided revision. And if we aren't deciding anything, then that's okay too. But there will be confusion if you notify staff of a revision that isn't actually then going to happen.
You done, or you got any more
Not really.
on these things?
On tasks, well, I think I'll just, I did, when there's the concern about complaints and grievances, the word grievances I don't think appears in here anywhere, or maybe it's grievance, and I just added the S, and complaints. I appreciate that there is a way to address that, I need to reread it and just see. I like the idea of the speak fully button too, so. That's that for now. And I have other comments about the whole thing, so I'll wait.
Other comments about the handbook itself? Okay. Anything else at this time about the 3 slides that Chief Altmer presented? If not, we can open it up to the handbook conversation. Do you want to go first, Director Art, or do you?
I can.
Okay, go ahead.
The very first couple of pages, it says, and I know that you're still working on this and that there are going to be changes and things like that, but it seemed significant enough to mention. And that was the page where it says, the 11 mission, vision, and core values. Maybe put the vision and mission on that page, since they're not referenced as it is. Maybe put the whole strategic plan in there.
This is page 9 for anyone who wants to.
Thank you. Page 9, that's right. It's a nice intro, but I was like, where is the mission and vision? And a little criticism on that page, 2 things. One, there are, we have 8 charters at this point, and none of the people in the district's alumni that are listed include anyone specifically mentioned for their academic success. That was kind of nitpicky. There you go. Questions? The whole review annually, so I guess that is going back to tasks. If I were an employee and you were changing something constantly and I missed one email that you have updated this handbook, then I don't know about it, and you know, if that impacts me, that would be of concern. So I understand that we have people signing it to acknowledge that they have read it, but that's a specific date and time. And so we're not asking them to reread it 4 times because of 4 law changes, which the laws don't change that often anyway, is my impression. There'll be January if it's a ballot question, or by May or July 1st or something if it's legislative. So it really comes down, I think, to the policy if we change something. And I understand we might want to change policy right away, but I do have that concern about a churning of the document possibly. So I look forward to how that will be addressed as well.
Director, may I respond?
Oh, please.
We did have a long conversation about that. Again, the overall feeling of the EEG was that the ability to adapt the handbook is important. Obviously, there's always paying attention to, is it too much change to your notice point? I would say this requires significantly more notice than what is current practice. Right? So if there's a current practice change, we don't notify people. It doesn't mean that employee representation doesn't try to email, but there's no notification. So this actually takes our notification to a whole nother level, and I think is significantly more transparent than our current process.
Okay, that's good news. Okay. 2 other things that came to mind as I was looking at this, and this might go to Director Banks' comments about how this might not reflect completely where the board is, or how we can benefit incoming employees or incoming really, or employees that go away and come back. One is the seniority, and I realize the way we currently operate, this is page 61, seniority date, parentheses, date of hire, middle of the page. The last date of hire of an employee becomes their seniority date. So if they've left the district and is subsequently rehired, the date of hire shall be the most recent. So if someone has worked for us for 20 years, well, let's even choose less. They worked for us for 3 years, they go away for 2 or 3 years because maybe they have a military spouse, they come back. They start over from 0?
Currently, they do.
Well, no, be careful. They don't start over from 0 on the pay scale.
Oh,
They start over from 0 on years of service to the district. So they enter the pay scale consistent with their resume
Absolutely.
as reviewed by HR with a current limitation of a 14-year max placement, which although ours might be slightly different than other districts, very few districts take a straight, you've taught for 29 years, in Director Hafley's point, then you enter at 29 years. There's kind of this line that people draw such that people don't just tap out to then go to the highest paying district at the end of their career. So you get your pay requisite to your experience, but your seniority to the district is currently presented as those that haven't left and come back. Now, we could certainly enter into a military leave-ish type thing, but if we want to reward longevity, it should really be longevity of those that have been through all of those years and not the cumulative nature of that.
Isn't that how it is in the master handbook right now?
Yeah, so that just to add on what the superintendent said, this is current practice. Mr. Coughlin and I have had multiple conversations about the need to address this. It's the time needed to it, because this is complex, because it's not just a change. We have to figure out how to make a change without negatively impacting existing people. Because if we right now change seniority to say your total years in the district, all of our top 40, 10, 7, 20, all of that changes drastically. So we need to figure out a process to honor an existing methodology while moving into a new methodology. If that is the board's direction, we are fully committed to partnering and figuring that out. But this is currently what is practice.
Yeah, in there, we can think of all kinds of scenarios, right? Where somebody has been teaching for 20 years, so they've got great experience, and maybe it's not the military, maybe they take 2 years off for the Peace Corps. I don't know. They come back, like, I want to be back in D11, and they've lost 20 years. I do have some sympathy for someone who does that, or they've gone away a year or two to try a principal position, so that did not work for me. I want to go back to teaching where I left and
Don't they come back with the maximum of 14 years prior experience?
Yeah, so we're conflating what they get paid for and what their seniority date is. Seniority protects your current retirement incentive programs. It has zero impact on your actual para payments for retirement. All that's handled external. There's portability all the way across the state. You can work in a different district every year and gain enough years to retire for para. So we just want to be really careful that we're not communicating that we think anybody who leaves D11, and again, this is current practice, if they leave D11 and they come back, they enter the pay scale where it is that their resume represents that they should enter the pay scale. We do have a limitation at 14 years for that, and that does run risk if you leave at the 16-year point. But I believe that practice is not just because it comes from the current master agreement, it's consistent with how many organizations use seniority lists. You can't leave the military at the 18-year point and then decide you want to come back to get to your 20-year pension.
Okay.
If you leave at 18, when the goal was 20, you get paid for the time that you've put in. I'm not trying to make our document like the military, but the airline unions, all these things, sometimes you can freeze yourself in your seniority date if you take a leave of absence, and there can be criteria for what those leaves are. But if you leave here because you want to go work in a different district for whatever reason, and then you come back, yeah, you might be dishonoring the person that left, but you're kind of dishonoring the person that stayed as well. That person has stayed, that's here, that's now moving up the list, now they move down the list because somebody else who left came back. So I think if any recommendation, there could be a series of events that people freeze on that space. But I don't think we want to have portability of seniority for people's personal flexibility, while other people are making lifetime career commitments to District 11. Because really, and again, that's for a retirement incentive. Take any teacher anytime we want, can't wait to have them. But if you're looking to get to the top 40 and you want that opportunity, you know, it's like the gold watch. I mean, that's a lifetime's commitment.
Yeah, I would be curious what the group thinks of maybe freezing it then. Or maybe we have some, I don't know if it would be worthwhile to have some examples, but I would be interested in employee feedback on that. But
Yeah, I just may ask it again. I'm sorry.
Freezing their seniority when they leave the district? and
Yes, if
when
they come
and
back.
pick it up again?
Yeah.
I wonder what that,
Having been in 4 different districts, it wasn't portable. You didn't retain your longevity in whatever district. You can come back, which I think is a great opportunity. Like you said, if you don't like being a principal, you want to go back to the classroom or a learning coach, you're welcomed back and you're given credit up to that 14th step. But there is a risk to making those career changes. And I agree that those folks who stay, obviously I wasn't one of them, those folks who stay and continue to do a good job and continue to do more than they're being asked to do, they should be honored for all of that. So my going out and exploring other career areas, which I think teachers should be able to do, to expand their learning and expand the experiences they can bring back to their kids, it's a good thing. Then they come back, but you come back and you understand that you can't waltz out the door and then waltz back in because you didn't like what you did. Or you waltz back in and say, no harm, no foul, let's pretend I never left. That doesn't work. It doesn't show, it seems to me more game playing than it does professional development. It seems to me to be working the system to my benefit when I come from a framework that says, we commit to this profession. These are the kinds of things that are available to us. I understand if I'm going to move over to try another career, to try another aspect of this career field, I understand what I'm doing in the sense that I'm leaving behind. But I can always come back. I mean, the door's not slammed. In some companies, and that's true, once you've gone, boy, I don't want you back. So I think we need to honor the people who have stayed and continue to grow in their profession. And I think we need to set a clear expectation that we encourage people to try other things. We will take you back, but you don't come back to the place at which you stopped. You have to find out where you are now. And if you taught 17 years, you're only going to get paid for 14, then that's the choice that you make. And I just think that that's behooves the person making those decisions to look at all of those advantages and disadvantages before they make the leap.
I just, again, to Superintendent Gall's point, we don't want to conflate two. There's retirement in 14 years, is my understanding, and there's seniority, right? You don't come back, if you get rehired, your seniority date is not the 14 years, right?
No.
That's your pay scale.
Correct. That's your
Okay.
pay scale.
Right.
Yes.
So another example might be I'm a French teacher, I go abroad to strengthen my language skills, learn more about this country. I come back, I'm starting over at 0 for seniority. That's the
Exactly.
penalty.
I mean, that's the choice that they make.
Yep, that's a choice, so much for that particular
Academic.
professional development though.
It's
But there's
balancing
another-
the people.
Excuse me, but there's another way to do that. And another way to do that would be to I don't know another word, negotiate an opportunity with the district that says, I want to go do this for 2 years, and this is what I'm going to learn. This is what I expect to learn. I want a leave of absence. I'm not quitting. I want a leave of absence. And I go off and I do 2 years or whatever it is. And there's got to be a time limit. It can't be for too long. I think 2 years is the max. I go off, I'd say a year. I take a leave of absence. I go off for a year. I'm not being paid, and yet I can come back and step back into my own spot on a leave of absence because they've agreed to it. But not if I quit. If I quit, I quit.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about it, anyway. Thomas has got something.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna be really, really blunt. Part of the reason I objected to point 4 in that previous task thing is because this is the kind of conversation I do not want us to have as a board. We are way too in the weeds here. Staff is having to jump in and remind us not just what current practice is in the district, but what common practice across districts. We spun up a group to handle these questions, to discuss these questions. We gave them the task. Let's let them get it done. This is too much, in my opinion.
And my response to that is that as a board, we share a responsibility on what we are providing for the people who come to District 11 and work for us for hopefully their careers, in the sense that we are invested in what they do and how they add to the value of this district. And in adding to the value of the district, these are the kinds of things that let people be secure in making the decisions they're going to make in order for us to count on loyalty to them and their loyalty to us. And so I don't expect to have this level of conversation every year, but I do expect to have this level of conversation at the initial point of putting together a handbook from which we can go forward. And other boards can decide not to take that one in, but I think getting this thing up and off the ground, I think the board needs to put its stamp on it.
Okay, so to keep the conversation moving along, you took down the feedback. If this is something that is a conversation for the EEG to have and bring back, you can. But
If I can be honest,
Yeah.
President Malpacum, this is not something I think we can practically solve before the handbook is due. This is a very, regardless if it's coming from the board or the EEG, this is a very complex issue with lots of potential things to be careful of. We need appropriate time to do this right and justice by all potential staff. And so I don't think it would be reasonable to have this changed when we bring a final version of a handbook to you.
one of the things that we promised.
Brandon, can you summarize the point that we did negotiate last year on longevity?
Yes.
On the difference of not leaving for some of the reasons.
Yes, but across categories, yes. If the board remembers, we did add a category for one of the situations or examples was you're a teacher, you try to be a principal, and then you're like, this isn't for me, you go back to being a principal. If you remember, we set some expectations that kind of lives outside of the all three handbooks and within them all at the same time, that if a person has 25 years of consecutive service to the district, regardless of what employee group, and they did not qualify for top 40, top 20, or top 7, we would still offer the retirement incentive package to them. So we had one employee that would qualify for that who happened to go from teaching for 22 years to exec pro. They had 33 years in the district, but they were never going to hit the top 7 in the district. And so we did extend that opportunity. So we have closed a gap there. It doesn't mean we've addressed you are going to go study abroad and deepen your language acquisition, but we did close that gap for existing staff to make sure that somebody wasn't left out because they, within the district, still committed to District 11, tried a different career field for a while. That was a tongue twister for me.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I appreciate that. I do want to add one other thing. So this is probably something that we cannot address between now and June. But for hiring, and part of this, I understand your point, Director Carey, like, oh, please look at us away from this. But again, to Director Bankes' point, this is one time, especially where we maybe have some influence here. Page 62, it's ESP and Exec Pro, and if we hire somebody and they're placed on the STEP system, if they've got 20 years of experience, for example, they're gonna be equivalent to Step 10. But, and same with Exec Pro, 10 years experience, that's Step 5. And as we aim to recruit the best people we can, I worry that here we might be shutting people out if it's somebody who, we can think of all kinds of scenarios, right? You move to the district because you're from out of state and you're like, where can I work? If everybody does this in El Paso County, fine. If everybody in Denver does it, fine. But it might be nice to explore if we can offer higher steps to people who have more experience instead of what appears to be cutting it in half. Well, as it should, because it's 2 years of experience, but the maximum amount of years granted, that is my concern. We could get a long-term employee and of another district, and it's like, yeah, you don't really want to come work for us because we just can't recognize your years of experience. So I would be interested in us exploring or having them
Okay.
explore that in the future.
One of the things, all these things, the board promised us that um, uh, we will retain what is there in the current master agreement and the handbooks. Does this align with what we do as practice right now?
Yes.
We are not taking anything backwards, right? Okay, great.
Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, so at least we are not walking things back. This is what is in practice right now. If what Director Art is suggesting is improve this to a better thing, it's a conversation that can take place, but it may take a little bit more time. And but I want the community to know that what guarantees that we placed is happening right now. This is the current practices, but you may want to, when we do have time, explore what other school districts are doing and best practices we adopt some of them going forward. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else as far as, and
Can I have a
just for
couple
the,
easy
yeah, I'll
ones?
come to, and just for the board's thing, this is a draft version. They are putting in a lot of work, so things like punctuation marks, spelling, they will correct all of that, and it'll come back.
Please send it to us if you see it,
Yeah.
but you don't need to comment on it.
We don't need
today,
to comment
since
on
it's
it,
a
right? Director Beck.
I just have a couple of easy ones. On page, everybody deserves easy. On page 21, 1.34, it says a list of all district committees is available on District 11 Superintendent's website. I couldn't find the superintendent's website with all of the committees on there. So if you put a link like you do with the others, I would be happy.
Yeah.
And then the only other one was, it was on media, and I don't have the page number for that, unfortunately. It was on media, and it was a cautionary piece that said that teachers be sure not to take pictures or photos of students if the parents had opted out of them being represented in media publications. I think that needs to be bolded. There's something else in that same paragraph that's bolded. I think that needs to be bolded. So, and I'm thinking about all the Read Across Americas, and we took pictures. I trust that the teacher and the principal knew that they could take those pictures.
They do know.
I
They have a
know they're
list.
supposed to know, but anyway, I think it just needs to be bolded so that parents know that. Those are my two easy ones, I'm done.
Okay. Anything else from the board?
I just have a couple of things. I think maybe I'll just email you because they're not like substantive. I still can't say that word.
But I wasn't
Substantive.
listening, I'm sorry. Substantial?
Yes, or substantive,
Substantive.
whatever. Moving on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The one question I have is on page 28, it's talking about PD. And this might seem really nitpicky, but I have an actual question. The wording is something about eligible to attend versus, like in my mind, I would have thought it would be expected. And that's just what I'm wondering, like, I would have assumed we do expect our employees to attend, but maybe we do leave it up to their own discretion. And I would maybe say we change that culture. So,
Professional development,
It's the second paragraph.
Yeah, but we're saying they can do it inside and outside, and in that particular sentence, they're not expected
Yeah.
to go both inside and outside.
okay,
So I see your point. You know, we could say they're expected to attend professional development, period, and then they may avail themselves of those things in there.
okay. If you all think it says what it needs to, I trust you. Just when I read it, that's what went through my head.
Yeah, it's more of notification of staff that they are allowed to attend professional development outside of the district. I hear the feedback though, happy to look at language about what's our expectation to attend district professional development.
And then I'll just email you the other things if it still was weighing on me after tonight.
okay. So if individual board directors are emailing, just let the rest of the board also be
Okay,
aware of
okay.
it, so that way we know what changes are being made for all of them. One other thing that I would suggest, I don't think this has gone through legal review yet, right? So before it comes back to the board, let it go through the legal review process. With,
Legal has it for
Legal,
review.
yeah, legal does have it already.
They just
yeah,
had
but they
other
haven't
things to
had the
start.
time to review it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just say my thing, because it'll be faster than me emailing. On page 26, we spell out what percent contribution employees give to para, 11%. I would just say, let's also include that as a district, we provide, is it 26 or 28?
22.3.
22, see, I was wrong. 22.3%. So like if we're calling out the employee share, let's call it the district share so that people are aware. That's a huge part of their compensation that the district provides, but I don't think we always remember it.
I'll throw in, I was incredibly impressed with how few typos and punctuation errors there were here, so yay.
It's the highest praise of the night.
That's coming from you.
I know, I'm like, oh yeah, Brandon, I got a period or two, a couple typos, there's an extra word. But no, it's, for the length of the document and the number of people looking at it, I was just like, this is very readable for not having to
Well done.
stop.
Yeah, if I can just take a moment, obviously want to thank the committee and thank Chief Ottmer, but this is really Ms. Harris and her team. This is dozens and dozens and dozens of hours on top of the work that they do on a daily basis. We didn't say, hey, guess what, HR is closed for the next 2 weeks. Well, they work on the handbook, so they've just figured it out, and that came with great sacrifice, and so I want to make sure we acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So what are the next steps? You still are going to have EEG meetings, I assume?
Yes, we were waiting to hear when the next one will be based on the feedback from tonight, but we have a tentative hold in early April and one in later April. We obviously need to get to finalized formatting. You'll notice that there were numbers that we started to include and we didn't go all the way through that because we were trying to decide, is that the right structure for this? Also, when we think of the state accessibility laws, it's likely not to be published as a static PDF, which is what you got right now. We need to find a different way to publish this so that it can align with all of those pieces. So that's our next layers of investment in addition to the feedback that you gave us tonight that the committee or the group will be working through.
Okay. Thank you again for all the work. You heard the feedback that came from the board. Take that into consideration as you proceed, and let legal review the document as well before it comes to the board, and then possibly later in April sometime. This can come to the board end of April, maybe some point in time at that time. A more put together or comprehensive document by that time with all the necessary feedback. You want to close it off?
Again, couldn't be prouder. Jen and her team have just, it's been a real lift. And really, to only a couple of members are here, to everybody included in the process. It was a big leap of faith for people to step into this space. And I think that we are trying to show that we will deliver on the things that we say we will deliver. And I know that's been an extraordinary lift on a lot of people. And for that, I'm also greatly appreciative and impressed.
Did the committee also commit to a term? Is it a 1-year term, 2-year term?
It is a 1-year term.
It is a 1-year term.
Yep. And so we've actually had a really good conversation about after we establish a handbook, what's the work of the committee? And the committee has really great ideas about really being impactful and influential in the district. And so what we've said is let's get the handbook drafted and then we can really define what the work of the committee will be. Because yes, we will have some handbook revisions next spring, but we're gonna have 8 months of really quality time to do some really great stuff on behalf of the district. And so I think we're excited to get to some of that space as well.
Nice.
Okay, thank you. And the 2 EEG members who are present in the audience, I did mention you at the very beginning. I do want to call you out specifically, so people in the audience, if they are watching, Mr. Coughlin and Mr. Reed from Columbia, thank you for participating in the EEG and also being in the audience today. Thank you.
No musical tonight for us?
Not tonight.
You sure?
They did that.
We're all still tapping our toes.
He doesn't have the kids, yeah. Thank you. Okay, you pulled up the document out here. So just to give a update to the community as well, the board had a board retreat last week, and several people from the community were present in the audience. Board retreats usually take place off location, and it also gives an opportunity for the board to be candid and in an informal atmosphere, discuss what are the board priorities, future steps forward, collaboratively work with Superintendent Gall and his team as well. So those board retreats are not recorded. So some of the things that came out of the board retreat was tasks that the board would like to task the superintendent with. And since we can't do that formally at a retreat, those are the three tasks that are the board talked about. One was the assessment report, and the task is it characterizes what the task is and what the staff ask is and the timeline, similar to analysis of time in a school day. And then the third one is the committee day. These are all discussions that the board had. What we are asking the staff is to bring together some options for the board to consider by the end of the school year. Some of the timeline is given out there, end of the year. And also, if two board members are specifically assigned to help with that task as well, that is captured out there, who the board members are. So this is tasking administration, so I'm just going to throw it out there. Is the board comfortable giving me the thumbs up, so we can, or giving the superintendent the thumbs up at this time, so that we can direct the superintendent to bring this up? Okay, I've got 4, 5. So, Director Art, you have any thoughts?
Well, I think when we talked about the board committee workflow, it's not really clear on there that, I don't think that we were, I'm fine with exploring proposals, but I think the community or DAC, they need to be certainly consulted along.
And that's what
committee
is,
chairs, yep.
it says out there the superintendent team works with committee chairs.
Yep, and they should
at the
take
bottom
that
of
back to their committees, I think, because the proposal is to meet just one night and it would be a Wednesday, and I think that
And what I would,
I've got some concerns about that, but
Right.
I'm open to hearing proposals.
yeah, it's just options that they can consider and bring it forth. It can look a little bit different than what it is right now, but it doesn't need to be one day. It can be a different day. Whatever it is, it's options that you can explore with the committee chairs, the superintendent team can explore and bring feedback to the board by the end of the school year. Dr. Kerry, you had something? I thought you lifted your... Okay, I thought you lifted your hand up. Okay, thank you for that. So you got the thumbs up for that. Just want to go to the other part of it and also give the community an update. We talked at the board retreat about the letter that came from the Office of Civil Rights. And this letter was put out on February 14th, and it advised school districts and also higher educational institutions to ensure that their policies and practices comply with what was covered in the letter, that we are not out of compliance and discrimination is not taking place in the district based on the characteristics that they had listed in the letter. The board discussed and we consulted with legal counsel as well on the letter itself that came from the Office of Civil Rights and how the board should respond to it on the basis of the recommendations that came, because some of it is tied into federal funding that could potentially get impacted, as the letter indicated out there. So one of the recommendations, the board did talk to legal counsel in executive session as well today to get guidance. And one of the recommendations that came up at that time was to consider the equity policy, which is policy AG, I think, and the recommendation that came from legal counsel was either that policy has to be revised at a higher 30,000 feet level or completely repealed. And those are the two options that were presented to the board by lifting the policy to a higher level. It would pretty much resemble the non-discrimination policy that the board already has in place. So it would be a redundant policy. The equity policy would be. So I will throw it up there and see if the board has any feedback on it at this time, and as to the two options that are that were presented to the board. Okay, if
Well, I know that some people believe that the policy AG should go away. I will mention that it was a policy that was developed with significant community input. And as I look through it, I don't believe it is as repetitive as might be suggested. And equity, the third bullet, we must provide each student appropriate resources needed to achieve success. Fourth bullet, we must provide safe school environments for all students. There's actually a typo, all students, in collaboration with surrounding communities. These are what the equity in this policy is pointing to, along with the other bullets. It isn't something in a personnel policy of affirmative action. I realize that some of this is currently offensive to our national leadership, but this is a commitment that we are going to do right by every one of our children. And so I would encourage the board to keep it. And I would say that if words like marginalized and the word systemic racism have you concerned about legal ramifications, one, I would say make them come for it. And two, because it's not illegal. We are not discriminating by recognizing that some people have not been recognized in the past. And indeed, right now, they're undoing recognitions of people who were not recognized in the past. So I would prefer we keep the policy. I will ask people who helped create the policy to come in and suggest to you why it exists. And I just would prefer we keep it, and I will oppose any attempts to take away something that recognizes that we need to do right by every one of our children. If you want to go in and edit it, maybe, I understand. But taking it out completely, that's a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
And some of it could be covered under the non-discrimination policy, others could be in the operation of our schools. I would think that safe school environments for all students would be covered in a policy somewhere elsewhere. I can't, point out which policy it is, but I would assume that that is covered in a policy at some place somewhere. You heard Director Art. Any other Director Nelson?
Just on that concern about the policy GBA, that was the other policy mentioned in executive session.
Yeah.
That there were concerns about some of the language in there. I just had a question on, are we planning to just ask legal counsel to make the suggested edits that they were concerned about and then it come back to us?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not gonna be like a board member taking it, right? Because we don't know exactly what the concern, okay, great.
That, I was going to come to that
Oh,
after
okay.
this policy AG, but
Okay, sorry.
is there anything you want to?
So on, I do support repealing the equity policy because there is language in there that is concerning, and a lot of our non-discrimination policy covers what is needed, and I'll also add that our, I'm trying to find it really quick. Policy AD, which is our school district vision, mission, and strategic planning policy, also calls out our desire to meet the unique needs of students and serving everyone in our district. They're under the strategies section of that policy, the sentence reads, "We will guarantee an ecosystem of equitable practices to meet the unique needs of all." And I think that summarizes it really well. And so I feel comfortable with repealing the policy, the equity policy, because it's already covered elsewhere.
Okay. Any other feedback at this time from the board members? So this will, Director Jorgensen is not here, and he indicated to me that he is in support of repealing the policy as well. And he wanted to make sure that his voice was heard as well. So going forth, this policy would have to come as non-action and action to ensure that the board adopts or repeals this policy. So is the board comfortable bringing this policy, so by a show of thumbs up, to the next board meeting? And you heard about revision and repeat, taking it to a higher level. First, I'll start with repealing. Is the board, there was two board members at least that have publicly stated that they are for repealing the policy at this time.
I also am in favor of repealing
The policy, okay.
for the same points that you pointed out. I think it's repetitive. I think we've covered this in other areas. I think, I'll just stop there.
Okay, perfect. So this policy will come as non-action item at the next board meeting for repeal.
So you're the fourth person?
Okay, fourth, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, it will come as a repeal, but the board will certainly take into consideration the feedback that we get from the community and proceed forth as we enter into the discussion, as we always do when items come as non-action action. Okay, is the board comfortable with that? Okay, so I think I'm just trying to figure out how to make sure that I haven't left out anything that I needed to cover at this point in time. Next week, there is no board meeting because we are in the middle of spring break. And so the next meeting will be in the first week in April, and that will be a board meeting at the board dais. And when that agenda is figured out, we will let the board members know about that. Okay? Okay. Chief Atmer, did I cover everything? Did I leave out anything at this time? Just wanted to make sure. Because you sit in on the board agenda meeting, so I just wanted to make sure that I covered everything that needed to be covered. Okay, with that, I do want to give a shout out to Katrina that for stepping in and sitting in to cover for Melissa Olson. So thank you. Appreciate that. We are adjourned officially at 7:06 p.m.